Welcome back to another episode of True Crime Wednesday. Tonight we are back on the murder of the Gray State, and everything is working out a lot better so far. I'm gonna keep my fingers crossed here and hope that the internet is doing a lot better because of this router. Alright, but first things first. What we're gonna be discussing tonight is the rest of the Ken Mains correspondence with Dan Hennon, and then we're going to get into the summary of findings that what's his face had posted. Ken had posted, and that's what he sent over to Dan. It's a little interesting. It's a little unnerving. Well, maybe not unnerving. You can see where he kind of shifts gears. But he also, at the very beginning of the conversation, we noted that he did essentially give Dan two options. One, he would be an investigator, so he would actually go there, things like this. He would actually investigate the case. The other one was that he would be a consultant, which he would look at the case from afar and whatever Dan had sent him, and then he would essentially give his answer as to what he thinks happened. Or if things are done the right way, all the data like that. So, what we have here is the conversation gets a little interesting, and I'm not sure how Dan didn't see this, but at the same time, I also understand what Dan was basically saying. I hired you to investigate this, not to be a consultant. While you have Ken going on pretty adamantly, pretty consistently saying, I'm going to be a consultant. Doesn't directly say it, while Dan, more often than not, typically, at least, says, I hired you to investigate this, not to be a consultant. So, not sure why it ended up going this route, but it did. So, we know that Dan, as you can see on the screen, Dan had actually sent over a list, which we're going to go over. They are in the summary of findings, and you can see Ken's answers, and they're very terrible. For the most part, they don't do anything. He has the answers on some of this stuff, and there's some speculation on some things but there's serious questions about this case. So, he goes on, and this is on May 14th, 2019. Dan had sent over the list, and Ken says, these are good. I can answer some now off the top of my head. Others I will research, but I will include these questions and answers in the report if I have an answer for them. Okay, now he's still being pretty respectful at this point. But he's essentially going over these questions, and he's like, okay, I can answer some of them. Great. You'll see later, he doesn't do a good job at researching. He doesn't do anything really. He just, I don't know. It's the biggest waste of money I've ever seen. It's pretty ridiculous. Next up we have, and you'll notice the emails here. That's the other thing to note. Like there's Crowley case dash final steps, Crowley case dash list of inconsistencies. You'll see these, there's all sorts of them. So, this one says, you have provided me more information than I normally get on cold cases, so thank you for that. I have enough documents, if anything at all. I would like to know more about Kamel and David's religious beliefs. This is also coming from the very, very beginning, which I'll show you right now. Right there, okay? He doesn't want to go and have any he doesn't want to have any biased stuff, but what's he do? He watches a documentary about the film of the film on the case. What's funny about this is you look at the time. This is 2019, which means that the Sloppumentary is already out. Now, A Gray State, or the Sloppumentary, as a lot of us call it now, is just nothing but a propaganda hit piece. They try to go and basically call David crazy. They try to say that he did it. There's no proof. There's absolutely no proof. As I did on one of my very first live streams for investigative streaming on here, I've shown that. It's impossible for David to have done this. Literally impossible. don't know how many times that needs to be, shouted on top of rooftops, the top of our lungs. I don't know how much more proof we need. He couldn't have done it. Literal impossibility. Forensic mycology would show that. You can just look over at Ranya's the mold on her body. You can actually just go and look at that, and then you look at what the mold most likely is. We don't actually have the samples of it. The police at the time, this is something that was actually done. They didn't do it though. They didn't gather any forensic data on this, so therefore they thought nothing of it. They should have though, because mold can tell you all sorts of details. That's the great thing about forensic mycology, because if there's an absence of bugs, what do you use? You use forensic mycology because mold still grows. Fungi still grows. So, that being said, you can also narrow it down by temperature and things like this, 68 degrees. I've already shown this off plenty of times over. Literally, they didn't do the one thing they needed to do to prove things. This actually narrows down the time of death, and also it can show you the death order. They didn't do this. This guy doesn't notice this at all. Yet he notes he's this great detective and everything. He's fantastic. A little detail here already shows all sorts of stuff. Then you got the decomp time, and there's all sorts of things you can look at, and then just literally it shoots it down. David didn't do it. But he watched the Sloppymentary. That's the only documentary that's been out on this, from what I could see. And it's around this time. So after... and he did say he did watch the documentary after his initial review of the police reports and crime scene video. And he's trying to say, well, I did watch the Sloppymentary. Okay? And he explains why he did it, which, to some degree, makes some sense. Why? Because could you see the home videos outside of the movie? Mm-mm. That was done on purpose. They wanted that out there like this. He was already making his mind up because he saw Allahu Akbar on the wall and automatically assumed. Well, that's showing now that he automatically sees that, and there's some bias there. He doesn't bother looking at the rest of the crime scene. He focuses in and hones in on this, and he goes, this is it. Did he even think that could have just been a red herring? But I digress. We're going to get right back into what we need to. So he goes over the stuff, and he basically is like, yeah, as a consult, he makes sure it says this right here. As a consult, I have plenty of info. As a private investigator, I would travel to Minnesota, view crime scene, and talk to people. However, I am just consulting and providing my opinion to you. Okay? So now he's making this very clear. This is also on the 14th, and he's making it very, very clear. This is what I'm doing here. That is all. So, that same day, Dan responds. He says, is there anything in particular you'd like more info on? Or do you feel you have enough information to complete your findings? Do you have any... I'm about to bring this up separately. I can't see that. So I think it is... 1 second, everyone. I absolutely got to read this. I can't read it from this. You guys can. You guys will be able to because it's going to be blown up. I won't be able to. Do you have any interest in making a trip to Minnesota for various interviews, etc.? And he even goes on to say, would that be helpful at all? Okay, so this is him saying, okay, I see what you're saying here, but I'm interested in investigating here, because he makes it very, 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 very clear here. He wants him to be able to go and have a good amount for his findings. And he's like, well, if you have interest in it, well, let's look into it. So this is Dan trying to say, okay, well, I hear you, is what it sounds like at least. I hear you, that you're just saying you're consulting, but I'd like you to investigate this. Would this help? No. Let's move on to the next one. And I'll have this all in a timeline for everybody to read. Hopefully tonight or tomorrow. So this next one, now he says, I do not think there are. I am limited as to what I can receive as well. However, this case has more information than I would normally get. I should be done with this report in a week. Now this is on the 28th. On May 26th, oh, I have this out of order. Whoopsies. He says, would there be any other reports that appear? Okay. So basically saying, is there anything else you might be getting? He says, no, there's not. I'm kind of limited as well. So, and he goes, a report was sent out, and this is on the 31st, mind you. He said in about a week. This is like 3 days. Right, in a week. He already had the findings done. He had it done. He wants to be rid of this case. Report was sent out to your address yesterday. You should receive it today or tomorrow. Please let me know when you receive it. Thank you for the opportunity to review this case. So then Dan goes on July 17th. He goes, okay. Well, thanks again for your work on this case. It was helpful. I have put together a list of 15 points of clarification that I have. Also, I have listed 12 bullet points of items that your investigation didn't cover that I feel are relevant to this case. Okay, now, this is where things start to go and take a nasty turn, because on the 18th, instead of just, responding, back and forth, he clarifies. He goes, damn. That is why two people looking at the same thing in court argue about what they see, even though it is the same thing. I state my opinions and move on. With that said, I feel strongly about my assessment of this on this case, but it is my opinion. The points you bring up do not change my opinion, however. Okay. Problem here. Okay, the big problem here. You're going to see, this is where we start getting to the summary of findings. You're going to note so much, because I'm going to go over it. I'm going to go and explain. I'm going to give you answers to these things, because I can give answers to a good majority of them, at least from what I recall. So let's move on to the next one. So here's the bullet points here. So blunt force trauma to the piece of David's skull. He says there's 13 indentations found, appear to be from a hex-shaped tool. And he says, I did not see this documented in the police reports. I may have missed this. Now, you're going to note that he does this a lot. I did not notice this. I did notice this. I did not notice this. He doesn't answer giving any clarification. He says, yes, I noticed it or I didn't notice it. Essentially is what it comes down to, which is, in my opinion, that's really faulty on his part. That's really bad. So, doesn't answer the questions. So he did not see this document in the police reports. They may have missed this. Well, it's not in the police reports, for one. For two, 13 indentations found? I don't know about that. But even then, damage to the skull, if you damage somebody bad enough in the skull, that retains to be permanent. Okay? Your skull doesn't just go and flip right back to normal as far as I know. I've looked at it a few times. I haven't seen anything really showing anything to show that, yes, your skull will totally recover and it'll pop itself right back into shape and everything. No, you damage somebody's skull enough, it's not going to grow back the same way. It's, if it does regrow in areas or anything like this, it's not going to go and fix itself in the same way. It's very, very much like a scar. Does your skin perfectly heal every time? No, it doesn't. It's the same kind of thing. This is internal, and this is something, if it does heal, it would heal just extremely slow. But it doesn't heal the same way. Okay? But as for 13 indentations, I did not see 13 indentations either. However, is it possible there was blunt force trauma? I think it is possible. Okay? This is basically what this asks here. There's blunt force trauma to the piece of David's skull. 13 indentations, I don't know about 13. Were there indentations? There were indentations. You could see it. That could have been caused from prior fights, combat wounds, things like this. There's all sorts of things that could have been damaged by. But once again, blunt force trauma, I mean, you can see there's indentations. So, but 13, I think it's too many. Next one he says is the end corner of the living room recliner has massive blood stain easily seen in the photos, but there was no body near it. All he says there is, I did notice this. Well, Kenneth, yes, it was there. You answered correctly in saying, yes, you did notice it. And there was no body there. Thing is, you have to look at the size of it. You look at it, and we're looking at there's two possible answers here. It was something quick, something hits it and then fell off, or something was literally done there. Now, based on the size of this, you could easily argue it could have been David's hand. Why would it have been done there, though? Because he didn't do it, obviously. Now, I know the police narrative is saying that Paleo ate the hand. They never really they didn't test any of the dog feces at all. They didn't see any areas where he'd thrown up. This dog was commonly known for eating dry food. We didn't see anything showing that the dog ate raw meat. The human body at this point would have been raw meat. It would have already started to decompose because it doesn't take long for it to start decomposing, but that's the thing. Point here is the dog would have been throwing up. Vets all over the place have made this very clear. I'm going to have to go and make the point to actually get one in the main video. I see this now. I will have to. So you guys can expect this in the big video when that eventually comes out. As for for what Caroline is saying right now, Caroline Smith is saying, "You're asking any luck in the Colorado case?" I have not. I've been all over the place. I'm going to be looking at that case here, hopefully in the next, give or take, 3 weeks. Just depends on the schedule. Right now, like I said, my big thing right now is I've got a bunch of products I'm trying to go and get released currently, and I have all sorts of other kinds of like behind the scenes business kind of work I'm working on. So a lot of the stuff right now tends to be stuff I can just kind of jump on and we can go over. Not a ton of investigating. I know it sounds kind of lazy, but it's just between Comic Wars is finished up this week and with my investigations and TikTok and everything else, I just haven't had the time. So expect in the next, like I said, probably about 3-4 weeks. That's where I'm guessing I'm going to hop back on the case. I'm going to be sending a request for I'm going to be sending out a FOIA for some requests on some pieces of information. Hopefully I'll be able to hear back from them before I stream next, but I do have some things I do want to go and look into on the case. I have it set aside on a notebook, just for that case, just directly things I want to go and look at that we need the information on. So I want to try and explore these areas. So, but good question. I do plan on getting back to that here very shortly. Next question that was that Dan posted though. It says Facebook post deleted on David's personal page. Note, the laptop was in police custody. Did someone hack his account? Did investigators pursue this? And all he said for this is, I did not see this in the police reports. Once again, didn't answer it. So, big thing here. Yes, Facebook post deleted on David's personal page. I didn't happen to see any of them personally. I'd heard about them from several reliable sources that had kept an eye on it. So thank you guys in the Justice for David Crowley and Family Facebook group. Totally appreciate that for doing that. And I haven't directly seen proof. I'm just taking us on their word at this point, but there's been several people that have actually said, no, we've witnessed this. And the laptop was in police custody. So did someone hack his account? Well, he had his passwords up on his wall. So anybody that would have been in the house could have easily gotten in and could have done these things. Now, as for when they were changed or deleted, this is the crucial point here. We'd have to see that. So if anybody had a comment on any of those posts, you should have a timestamp for it. So if you can go back to that date when you were talking to David Crowley, you can actually search on Facebook. When you had conversations with people, his Facebook account is still up. But if you were able to search and see when these things were deleted, then you can actually start. We can nail it down. So I should say that on there, but Yeah, so we're just waiting on that. But yeah, other than that, yes, this is a little weird. And no, investigators did not pursue this. There was a whole lot they didn't pursue. You'll see here in a second. There's this next one's actually a big one because there was $50,000 cash withdrawal from a Minneapolis bank branch, which was Wells Fargo, on October 17th, 2014, from Dan Crowley Sr.'s bank account while he was out of the country on business. Who made the withdrawal and why? $50,000 amount would be in line with an amount required to pay someone to kill 3 people. Now, we've discussed this before. This is something that has been discussed when I had the Twitch channel. Yes, Dan is correct. $50,000. That is typically what we find on the dark web. You'll see this is a typical hit. Now, this also includes if there's going to be some minor witnesses, things like this. There is like some cleanup essentially. You need to go and take care of this, this, and this. That way, it's a clean kill. Essentially, that's how that one works. If you guys are interested, I will go and see if I can find some posts on the dark web just to post them. That is a little dangerous, yes, I know, but you know what? I'm not really scared of any of those people on the dark web. So, and this isn't me being foolish. It's just good luck. It's not me getting cocky, I promise you. It's just I'm very serious when I say good luck to them. And I would have no reason why anybody would want to go and have a hit on me anyways, but okay. But the $50,000, we know that was actually Dan Jr. that actually withdrew that. How do we know? Because we were able to go and take a look at his handwriting, and you can take a look at and that's on the presents, and then you go look at the handwriting that was done on the withdrawal slip, and that was his handwriting. It's not David's. David's got very, very, very sloppy handwriting. Kamel will be the next possibility, but everything aligned perfectly when it came to Dan Jr. We're going to show that. That'll be in a separate video because there needs to be one just directly on the finances, so expect that eventually as well after the police report. So there's a lot we got to get to, but that'll be after the police reports. Possibly slightly before, but that'll be coming too. Let's see, the next one. Danny August Mason created a new Minnesota-based company called Gray State Universe, LLC in May 2015. Why? What did he say for this? I do not have an answer for this. Of course you don't have an answer to this. You didn't do any research, Ken. Sorry, but you didn't do any. Now, he did create this. Now, as to why, well, he also tried to go and pursue Gray State still. Now, he lied very, very blatantly to the police when he said he was just the writer or just an actor. He had no ownership. He admits in interviews, on audio clips and things like this, that he's one of the creators of Gray State. He admits it on Alex Jones' channel on InfoWars. He does it all over the place. But all of a sudden doesn't want to take credit for it. They didn't pursue him after this either, which is ridiculous. Danny August Mason hired an attorney to get a trademark for Gray State LLC in May 2015. Why? Once again, I do not have an answer for this. Ken, as a consul, you're doing a terrible job here, man. You didn't do any service for this guy other than you just read the stuff and then you watched the sloppy-mentary and let it just basically regurgitate it with that and the police narrative said, dude. It's almost blatantly what you did. So, why did he hire an attorney to get a trademark for it? To fully take it for himself. Now, we know for a fact that Danny August Mason was still an owner. He could still take some ownership for this. We know Mitch Heil couldn't anymore, and with David and his family being dead, the only next one in line to be able to do that would have been Danny August Mason, since he would be an owner. But why did he take this trademark out? Because he really wanted to make sure it was done, his film, his project. But he couldn't just, that's the thing. It's Gray State LLC, not Gray State Universe LLC. Okay? So note that. There's two differences there. He said, and then at the very end he says, you have to remember you hired me as a consultant, not a private investigator. I looked over the materials supplied and based off that I gave my opinion as a consultant. I was not hired to track down leads or interview people. Therefore, some of the questions you are asking, I do not have the answers to. Ken, you said you were going to do some research. You did not research And if this is what you call research, this is some of the worst research I've seen. I've seen literal middle schoolers, back when I was in middle school, doing better research than you did. So as an investigator, you failed miserably here. You're correct. You were hired as a consultant. But with information compiled that you got, the police files, you could have researched this and chose not to. Did you really look like very hard at the pictures? No, you glanced at them. That's all you did. You didn't look hard. So, terrible job there. Next up, if it'll load up. And I do apologize, I'm getting over a little bit of a cold, so you hear me sniffling, this is why. So Dan responds on July 18th at 3:48 p.m. I'm not interested in debate. I'm also not looking to persuade you. Says it twice. A little particular, or a little odd as well. He goes, these relate to items in your conclusion that answered questions that were not asked correctly, or not interpreted correctly. These are merely misunderstandings. He just wanted clarification. That's all he wanted. Couldn't even get that. So for the 12 bullet points, it says these 12 bullet points were not in your conclusion. I just want to know if these were missed by mistake or if they were not investigated. Now, this is the big thing here, Dan. Okay? And I know what you're trying to do here, and I know he used the term investigated as well, but then he switched over and saying full on, he is only consulting. And basically he's saying here is, get bent, I got my money and I'm out. I've done what I felt was necessary. Not what you are asking, but what I felt was necessary. So, this is really, really terrible that Ken did that. Really messed up. Big, huge waste of money, and don't recommend him to anybody. Based on this, his investigative skills are pretty subpar. So he says, I've got two questions. Who would you recommend I hire as a private investigator to overturn every stone in this case? And two, what is your fee to hire you to overturn every stone in this case? So he even says, look, if you're not going to do it, I want to hire somebody else. But if you're willing to, how much extra do I need to pay you? Now, he basically lays this all out. Okay, this is what he is asking for. Now, you're going to see here in a second, he doesn't get his way. Like, at all. It's actually really sad. So the answers. So who would you recommend I hire as a private investigator to overturn every stone in this case? I do not know many private investigators, but I am sure there are some out there who would investigate this for you. What is your fee to hire you to overturn every stone in this case? I'm not taking any more cases currently. Of course you're not. Yeah. See this next one. We have detectives from Apple Valley PD that didn't even vet the statements made by family members about phone calls or texts, and after simply looking them up from the AT&T records, they don't jive. And all he had to say is, I do not believe they did sloppy work. Again, this is my opinion. They did not review the phone records. Simply put, they claimed Chris Peck texted David. There is no text record at all from Chris Peck at this time. Let's see. The key players in the, quote, orbit, end quote, of David Crowley and some within his very own immediate family are very strong suspects here. And so what does he say? Again, this is your opinion along with a lot of others, not mine. And then the next question is, David's own mother suspected something wasn't right, and she wound up dead 7 months later under very strange circumstances. And what does Ken say? I understand, but it doesn't change any of the facts from the Crowley crime scene. No, but it makes it a little more weird, a little eerie here. She doesn't believe it. She's starting to look at this a little bit different. She's like, nah, you guys are saying this, but I don't buy it. It's not David. Next is the hex tool that caused the indentations on David's skull was examined by forensics experts who came to the conclusion David was beaten with a tool of some sort. I sent you this analysis in the form of a separate email. And Honestly, I do have to side with Ken on this. What forensic expert? Did they examine the actual skull? Anytime we're going to do this, if you for instance, you do a speech, right? You're writing a speech. You're writing some kind of report, some kind of research paper, right? What do you got to provide? Credentials. Who is this forensic expert? What's their expertise? How long were they in the field for? Where did they go to school? These things matter because this is how we start to define what an expert is versus somebody that's not. I've been over this before. So technically speaking, could I be considered an expert in graphic design? Yes, I have a degree in graphic design. So therefore, could I be declared an expert? Yes. There's some that will say, well, you only got a bachelor's degree. Sure, but I have a degree. I'm constantly using it. So what defines being an expert then? This is where this breaks down. And you're going to start seeing this, that people aren't consistent with this. For me, they have a degree, or they're in the field, and they've been doing it at least for a while, then they're an expert. But this is like one of the few times I actually tend to agree with Ken. And this is just because I agree. Where did we get this information from? Well, we know who we got it from, And thank you for doing that for those that, for the person that did do this. Thank you for doing that. That was actually, it was a good thing. However, the big thing here is I'm actually going to have to go and, I'm going to go and see if I can get a hold of either a forensics team in Portland or in Clackamas or wherever. I'm going to try and get a hold of one in Oregon and see if I can send this stuff over, and they can take a look really quick at a few photos and give their expert opinion and hopefully an interview. That's what I'm hoping to get. But once again, not going to hold my breath for right now. Got to provide as much proof as possible. Next up, July 22nd, 6:06 p.m. Dan writes, I'm attaching photographs I've run through various filters of the skull bone located on the living floor. Please take a look at the areas I've circled. It appears to be indentations of the skull, or on the skull resulting from blunt force trauma. The skull bone is David's per the police reports. So, what does Ken say? He goes, okay. Well, I did see these. Thanks for resending. I do not or cannot say those are indentations. Really? Of course, I am not a medical examiner and claim no such expertise in that area. Okay. Whatever, dude. I did not see that addressed in the autopsy report either. There was a whole lot not addressed in the autopsy report. You can also see they were inconsistent. Was there mold found on Kamel? Now, you can see the mold. But did they say there was mold? No. Did they say there was mold on Rania and David? Yes. Do they mention on those? Yes. Were all three of these reports written by the same person? No. Two were written by the main medical examiner, and the other one was written by somebody else. So, two different writing styles, I understand, but got to include the same information. But they didn't. So, and he didn't do a good job at actually looking into this stuff either, so. Shame on you, Ken. Dan next says, these weren't in the autopsy report, but that is the reason I hired you. And then Ken responds with, who said these are indentation marks? Dan responds, a retired deputy coroner. And then what does Ken respond with? And this is the only way, honestly, this is the same thing. I would come to the same conclusion here, and I'm still coming to the same conclusion. I would have to see his or her report. I don't see it. They're retired. Are they going to have a report? Unlikely. So when it comes down to this, there's going to be some issues here. Okay? There will always be some issues here. So. Oops. So, let's get the next part, which should be the last one. Yep, last one right here. Uh, So he says, no report, just another set of eyes looking at this case. Keep in mind, we've been at this for 4 years and have 2,700 members in our group. This doesn't really matter, honestly. Doesn't matter at all. He's trying to kind of puff up his chest and be like, look, we have people. Look at this, in all walks of life. Come on, just look at this, please. Basically, what he's trying to say here. He says, these members have had other experts in their field look at the evidence. He goes, your information was a regurgitation of what we already knew. If you watch the documentary called The Gray State, it's supposed to be A Gray State, by Eric Nelson, one can easily surmise this is a propaganda piece. He's very, very correct on this. The question is, why was a Hollywood producer brought into this case to produce a propaganda piece? The answer is pretty simple there. Gun violence. Domestic abuse. We can argue a few other things here, but gun violence is the big one here. Is what happened right after this homicide. He had politicians all over condemning it, saying, "Oh, this isn't okay, and we need to ban guns. We need to go do this, and assault weapons, stupid stuff." People that don't have any idea really what anything is when it comes down to a firearm, what these weapons actually are. They're a tool. The people commit these acts. It's not the tool. It's the act. It's the person. So, and he goes, so why was Alec Wilkinson from the New Yorker magazine brought into the mix to write a quote-unquote companion piece that was published right before the documentary was shown at the Tribeca Film Festival? Very good point. And this is definitely done on purpose. Because it was also very, very dramatized. It has a sense of flair to it. And very quickly done. And that's all it was there for. To boost this. And why? Because what does the movie promote? It promotes, vets. PTSD. They're going to have PTSD. Is that true of all vets? No. So, but it also goes into gun violence and all this. And that's the whole point of it. What does the article do? Same thing. So Ken responds, and he goes, I did not just regurgitate what law enforcement said. I agreed with their findings and thought they did a good job in their investigation. I was hired to give my opinion after reading everything. So, that's where he goes. Hey, how's it going? So, as you guys can see, he didn't do a good job of this. Yeah, granted, Dan should have really said, no, I hired you to investigate. He should have been a lot more forceful with that. Dan's a nice guy. I couldn't imagine that doesn't sound like Dan to me. I don't actively talk to Dan either, but end of the day, he should have been a lot more forceful. Look, I hired you to investigate this, not to be a consultant. If I'm hiring you to be an investigator on this, I'm hiring you as an investigator, simply put. He even offered, hey, well, what is it going to cost to basically get you to go out to Minnesota? And he doesn't respond to it. He just says, I'm a consultant, not an investigator on this. Well, let's start breaking down his summary of findings, because they're garbage. Okay. So that's the first part I wanted you guys to note on this. It's really funny. Oh, yeah, well, I did watch a documentary about the film about this case. Of course you did. So he makes this timeline. Doesn't do a good one. Mine's better. Sorry, dude. Your timeline's pretty much garbage. All right. Now, let's go up here real quick. He talks about money as being a motive, right? In the information that was provided, there were some business partners that stood out as potential suspects. Wow. Excuse me. However, without further investigation, I cannot rule anyone in or out. Yet, I will say there was possible motive for a vested third party to capitalize on the Gray State movement and the potential movie deal that may or may not have come to fruition. Okay? And he also labels revenge as anger. Revenge or anger could have been a possibility as well, but he tries to say that it could have been Kamel. Or, that he was lashing out at Kamel. Okay, here it is. Inconsistencies and abnormalities. Gun is 1 foot from David's left hand. So what does he have to say about that? This is one of the most glaring problems with this case. David's gunshot wound had an exit through the left parietal bone. This would indicate to me he was shot using his right hand. Yet, with the animal scavenging that took place, it is possible that the gun was moved. However, the most genuine answer I can give for the gun's positioning is that I cannot explain it. Yet I will say, if it was a staged suicide, the gun would have been placed in David's right hand. That's not true. There's always redirection. For staging a crime, redirection. Red herrings. There's all sorts of things you can do. He forgets this. But it's good. You don't have to be a master investigator to see this stuff. Blue blanket is over David's legs. Possible dog activity. Come on, dude. Is it possible? Yes. Is it likely, though? No. He's saying it's possible. Got to give it to him at this point. We can't really do much there. But it's not. I would disagree it's likely. Blood spatter is medium velocity due to blunt force trauma and flows in at least 4 directions. So he comes out and he goes, well, I'm not a blood spatter expert, so... He's like, but everything I see is consistent with a gunshot wound to the head. How many homicides you worked on, dude? We looked at your record. Not a lot. Let's go back over that. I want to show you guys this as well. So I think that was like 4. Okay. Here's his credentials here. So, we service all 50 states as well as overseas and specialize in missing persons, equivocal deaths, and unsolved homicides. Okay? That's all he's really got for this. Other than that, you look at it, what has he got an expert in? Or is he declared an expert in? Could he at least be? Drug task force. Narcotics. So once again, drugs. Drugs, financial. He didn't apparently do a very good job at that either because he completely ignored that. So he fails there. So already showing he's not good at financial either. Property and white-collar crimes. Let's see what else he got here. Also investigated numerous violent crimes, including robberies, homicides, cold cases, equivocal death, and missing persons. Has to be to continually repeat equivocal deaths, of course, and missing persons. I don't think he's really done much work on homicides because the one that we do know that he did try to work on, he didn't solve it at all. He was on it for a short while and then just gave up on it. Couldn't solve it. Sorry, dude. You should be learning from us, not from us learning from you. So, he doesn't have credentials to work on this case. Dan should have done a little more due diligence. I think he was trying to get some more of like a high-profile kind of person in on this to try and bring from Hollywood, bring from mainstream media and all this, but should have known that wouldn't happen. What was it? I think it was like 19. All right. Bloody footprints showed cleaned up blood when sprayed. He goes, I do not believe this is true. There were visible bloody prints, but they were enhanced with chemicals, which is standard procedure. True. But they wouldn't be wiping it. So he ignores this because there was some wiping, very clear wiping. So did they wipe it or did somebody else? This, I'd have to go and further look at it, and I'm pretty sure it was wiped before, so not after. But it very well could have been after, too. So I'd have to look at this again. A bullet hole in living room ceiling was not documented or seen until February 18th, 2015. True. To him, it appears to be an oversight, which happens. Does not mean it was done out of conspiracy or malice. Sure. However, anybody just walking into that crime scene would have most likely seen that. somebody. All the people that came in and out, they should have seen it, but they didn't. So that just means dum-dums. That's how I see it. They weren't effective detectives, though. No bullet, fragment, or cartridge found associated with the gunshot wound to David's head. So he says not true. Item 57 was a bullet that was found in the attic with David's DNA. This is true, but at the same time, does that mean David shot it, though? Even if that were true, right? Does that mean David shot it? No, but that's not what the question was asking. So, fruit on the counter is still fresh. Says I cannot tell what type of fruit it is. I would want to determine that first, and then to conduct an experiment in the controlled temperature environment to see how the fruit would react. My initial reaction is if this is kiwi fruit, it should spoil in the 68-degree temperature after 23 days. However, this is an assumption, and a controlled test should be conducted. However, my research showed that the fruit can be stored at temperatures of 65 degrees to 70 degrees for up to 8 weeks before spoiling. The bananas that are on the other counter are by contrast, it should be by contrast, very brown. He's got a point there. Back door is ajar, but that's the thing. You look at, he's even saying himself right here, 65 to 70 degrees, and it's going to be up to 8 weeks before spoiling. How many days is that? Well, you can break it down. That's 14, 28, 42, 56 would be what, 112 days? So we'd want to know when the bananas were picked up and things like this. This is why the financials are important. And then that's why we can start nailing these things down. How were they paying for groceries? We'd have to look at the accounts. And you look at the accounts, they'd be pretty consistent. You got a family here, so you're going to see some consistent payments because of food. Back door is ajar, 1/4 of an inch according to the police report. So this could be signs of something, but again, it could be nothing. Yeah, but it's open. Therein lies an issue here. So should be investigated. Back neighbor noticed back door open during the time frame, but doesn't remember when. Doesn't answer it. Again, could mean. He ends up putting a 10 here, so he messed up here. Again, could mean something, but could mean nothing at all. So he has a point there. Yeah. But that being said, they notice the back door being opened during the time frame. Once again, this starts opening up. When was the door opened? Now this matters because it was somebody was else in the house, which that's the only fair assessment at this point. Unless Paleo picked up the gun, was going bang, 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 because he just didn't like him for whatever reason, and decided, I'm going to go and hack off the hand, or rip it off, and then I'm going to go rip Ranya's full-on shoulder out of socket, devour that because you got to get rid of that in your hands. I mean, come on, Paleo's not going to do that. He can't. But I digress. Knife tested positive for blood of all three, yet it was not visible. It appears to have been washed and no prints on the knife. Why would this be a thing? Well, what's the one thing that would make sense? Why there would be their blood on this? Does it make sense for all three of them to have their blood on it? Nope. Unless they made blood packs. Nope. But then again, what are they missing in common? Their right hands. No right hands. Maybe they did. Ooh. No, they didn't. There's blood on it, and it appears to be cleaned off like that. It was probably cleaned off. And if it was cleaned off, they happen to be missing these things. Look at the knife. Okay? Tell me, is it serrated? Is this something that's going to be able to cut? That's all you need to ask. And you can break things down a little simpler, right? If the bodies sit out longer, the bones themselves are going to get mushier. Why? Because of decomp. What happens after decomp starts going? The bones become easier to snap and to tear through. Hence, having the knife there, open, but cleaned, with their blood on it, their DNA like that. This tells me the knife could have been used to go and start hacking things apart, to go and tear them apart. But he says it's not true. Lab report stated there was a mixture of DNA from 2 or more individuals. David, Kamel, and Rania cannot be excluded as being possible contributors to the DNA. You will not always get prints from items. This is just the reality of it. He's also got a point there. No apparent blood in area around knife. Knife may not have even come into play. There was no indication of stab wounds. Just because there's no stab wounds, there could be slashes. They could be used to cut, to break open, to pry open, things like this. All sorts of things could be used for. Writing on wall doesn't match David. This cannot be determined. Writing with a pen or pencil during the course of your everyday routines is very different than smearing something on the wall. You cannot compare handwriting to something painted or smeared in an area. I 100% agree with this. And I've been saying this since day one. David's fingerprints are not on the gun, nor anyone else's. Well, if it's David's gun, it should be on there, though. Just because you touch an object does not mean you automatically leave prints or fingerprints. Not true. Again, according to the lab report, it was inconclusive to David's fingerprints. Except, thing is, this is David's gun. If it's David's gun, you're going to be thinking, David's going to be testing. He's going to be going out and firing it. He's going to be cleaning it. He's going to be doing all sorts of things. This is something he always had on him. He even makes it very clear. He carries a gun everywhere he goes. Or pretty much everywhere he goes. Knife is on top of stuffing fibers and hair. You can find no indication of this. You gotta look at the crime scene photos, dude. Guy doesn't do that. Prints, ridge, detail of bloody footprints never identified. True, I believe that since David and Rania were the only barefoot people in the house, they were able to conclude it was David's footprints. If not, you would have to assume that an intruder was barefoot in the home to commit these murders. Not likely or probable. Not true. Once again, if you've got somebody that is trying to stage a crime scene, yes, they could. No high velocity blood spatter, nothing that shows gunshots to heads took place. He says, I think everything I observed is consistent with gunshot wounds to the head. Not really, dude. David's leg looks to be lying on top of fiber stuffing. Why and how? He doesn't have an answer for it. Not enough dog feces in the house, roughly 29 separate droppings. I would talk to a veterinarian about this, but in my opinion, is it consistent for a dog that was out of food and began eating the bodies? Dude, look at the photos. You'll see that he was not out of food. In fact, there was 2 bags full, or one was at least open, but there was no dog food bowl anywhere else in the house. So this becomes an issue. David's feet were not... Oh, whoopsies. Medical examiner did not rehydrate David's left hand or feet to compare to other evidence in the house. I do not know if this was done or not. It is not typical. He's got a point there. It's not, but at the same time, it wasn't done. So, and he would know that if he actually went over the medical examiner's reports, they explain everything they did. But I digress. It's like the first time he's ever read one, apparently. David's feet were not tested for blood. Again, I think they concluded it was David's footprints, and I agree. You want it to be David. You're biased already. When police left the scene, they had 6 casings, 1 unspent cartridge, and 4 fragments, but without having knowledge of whose blood, tissue, brain matter was on the evidence, it was determined to be a murder-suicide. Once tested, the evidence retrieved that night showed the blood belonged to Kamel. The police chief called it murder-suicide without the bullet that killed David being found. So I do not know why he did this, maybe because all the indications it looked like that to him. Does not mean it was a conspiracy or cover-up. No, but he shouldn't have said anything. Chris Klein was the one who reported the hole in the ceiling. It's true, he agrees. Chris Klein lied to the police about being in the house with Dan Sr., and he lied about having permission to be in the home. I would want, and so he says, I would want to look into why he lied, of course, if true. Chris Klein entered the attic before the police arrived. He goes, there is no relevance to the crime, in my opinion. Sure there is. Why wouldn't there be? Chris Klein shouldn't have been there in the first place, and if he's crawling around the crime scene, he's contaminating things. He's causing problems. Shouldn't have been there. Item 57, bullet fragment from attic was not or could not be tied to David's gun. This is not true. Lab report stated that item 57, bullet from attic, was fired by item 1. Yeah, I mean, the answer is at least a somewhat decent answer here. Let's see. Item 57 was found 1 month later after the scene was released and cleaned by a professional cleaning crew. This is not an uncommon occurrence. It doesn't show malice or misdirection by police, in my opinion. Of course, in your opinion, it doesn't. The police officers present that day, the crew from BCA and the cleaning crew did not see a hole in the ceiling. If it had been there, it would have been noticed, since Detective Bones stated when he was when he went in February, when they opened the door, he noticed an obvious defect in the ceiling. And he says, it is obvious they did not see the bullet hole. That has been determined. It is speculation and assumption they would have noticed. Blue blanket was under Kamel, yet over David. He says possible animal activity. He's got a point there. Technically possible. Knife blade was in the locked up position. He goes, I don't understand the relevance of this. Knife blade was pointing towards David's upper body. I don't understand the relevance of this. Decomposition does not equate to 3 weeks. Dr. Linsky states, states the decomp as early to moderate, which puts the bodies being left in the house for about 4 to 7 days, 10 days at most. He says, I disagree. I think the decomposition is appropriate for the conditions. Is it, though? Not really. Paley was thin and dehydrated. He did not present as an animal that had been feasting on dead human flesh. He says, I disagree. Dog wasn't feasting. It was forced to after running out of food. It didn't run out of food. No pools of blood located anywhere in the house. Where did the blood to write on the wall come from? He says, blood probably came from the head wound of Kamel. Item 57, bullet fragment from the attic. Does not have any blood tissue, hair in or on the fragment. Nothing could be detected, even after spraying the item or swabbing the item. He says, not sure DNA was recovered from this bullet and matched David. You get a whole lot of stuff here. And what does he just say here? He says, I disagree a lot of the time. I disagree. No, I don't agree with this. So, big ones we're going to look at right here, real quick. Number 42, the bodies were moved by the police and then written in the reports as being in the position found. How do we know this? I saw no indication of this being done. Well, you can see this through the crime scene photos. Once again, this guy didn't do a very good job. If he did a good job, he would have noticed, oh crap, they're already bagging up before before crime scene investigator got there. So, were the bodies moved? Absolutely. We know the gun was moved. We know all sorts of things were moved before, throughout the whole process that took pictures. Police did not look at anyone to be a suspect despite the proof of a large amount of money being at stake, and Sean Wright's threat to David saying he was upset with David because he felt he would be thrown in prison. So I think the police did their due diligence in interviewing potential suspects. No, they didn't. Should have been follow-ups. Kamel's left hand was originally under her body, so that means Paleo couldn't have eaten her left hand. It was missing prior to her body being placed. He says, I disagree. Why do you disagree now, buddy? This below is an item or an image from the detective's notes. This shows that latent print, palm print, LPI4 or IA-1, found in the magazine of the handgun had a visible scar. This information was not translated on typed police reports. It is reported that David Crowley did not have a scar on either of his palms. And we know this because we can see both of David's palms. You can see right here, LPIA-1, visible scar. Now he says, since there are no palm prints taken of David, they were unable to compare the latent and to observe a possible scar of the palm. In order to eliminate David as the source of the scar, I would track down his military records to determine if this was his, or at the very least, if he had a scar. So his conclusion comes up and he goes, it is clear Kamel was shot twice in the head and possibly 3 times according to the DNA. This is consistent with witness Olson, who heard 3 consecutive gunshots. That is a lot of anger being expended toward one individual. It makes me believe Kamel angered him in some way. His anger was directed towards her. He also goes on to say, it is obvious to me that David Crowley was diving into a downward spiral of madness. No, he wasn't. He believes it is more probable than not that David Crowley murdered his wife and then child and then committed suicide. See what I mean? He just quickly changes it. So, really great investigator here, right? Yeah, they did pretty terrible. So, But we are going to be cutting the stream a little short tonight. We'll be back on Friday with our final episode of